In continuation with infrastructure, we are going to do what is the state of infrastructure in India. We're going to talk about that. So, uh, infrastructure was basically a public area in the public place, but now they are thinking of bringing about a partnership. Secondly, we are thinking about regulatory authorities since we are bringing in the private people to participate. Then we also talk about what has been the what has been the Indian, how much does India invest, say about 34% of the GDP, and the state of rural infrastructure. What is the state of the rural infrastructure in India? So just go through this. This is what we are going to do. That what is the state of infrastructure in India? So it was found that traditionally the government has been solely responsible for developing the country's infrastructure. But it was found that the government's investment in infrastructure was inadequate, not enough. So therefore today the private sector by itself and also in joint partnership with the public sector, it is known as public-private partnership, has started playing an important role in infrastructural development. So we have certain projects and you must find out what they are as a homework. You should see how interested you are. So we find that there is a sort of talking about this private partnership and infrastructure development, it has become important for the need of independent regulatory authorities in infrastructure sector between the service provider and the government. There is a need because the competitive market system will not be able to provide infrastructural services in most of the cases. So it implies that development of infrastructure has the monopolistic characteristics. Therefore, infrastructural facilities are either built or run by the government or public sector enterprises. So now that we are thinking of permitting private sector to make investments here in this infrastructure, it needs to be regulated by the government so that the consumers are not exploited in the long run. So there is a need for an independent regulatory authority in infrastructure sector between the service provider and the government. Why? To ensure that the service provider should not have any vested interest in providing the service, and the service provider should not exploit its character by pricing the service at a very high price. So for that we do need the whistleblowers out here. We do need regulatory authorities in this area if we are thinking about bringing a partnership in public and private sectors to come up in this sector together, infrastructure. So also talking about this, we find out that there's a relationship between national income and composition of infrastructure. So in any country, as the income rises, the composition of infrastructure requirement changes quite a bit. So for example, in low income group countries, say like India, basic infrastructure services like irrigation, transport, power are more important. But as we find that the economies develop, most of their basic consumption demands are met, the share of agriculture in economy shrinks, and more service related infrastructure is required. That is why the share of power and telecommunication infrastructure is much more in high income countries. So again talking about infrastructure, it is the foundation of development. But even so, India just invests around 34% of the GDP on infrastructure. So now we come to what is the state of rural infrastructure in India. So, despite so much technical progress in the world, rural women are still using biofuels such as crop residues, dung, and fuel wood to meet their energy requirements. So, that is what they are doing. And not only that, they walk long distances to fetch fuel, water, and other basic needs that they fulfill. The census of 2001 shows that in rural India, only 56% households have an electricity connection and 43% still use kerosene. And even now, about 90% of the rural households use biofuels for cooking. And talking about tap water, which is such a rare thing, it is the availability is limited only up say to 24% rural households. About 76% of the population drink water from open sources such as wells, tanks, ponds, lakes, rivers, canals, etc. And also it's found that improved sanitation in rural areas was just around 20%. So we find that all weather roads, like that means pakka roads, are yet to connect more than half of the villages of the country. So there is much desired in the state of infrastructure in India.